You're listening to Supervision with a Vision, where we discuss all things supervision. I'm your host, Sarah, professional counselor, marriage and family therapist, play therapist, eating disorder specialist, and cookie lover, with my co-host, Heather, marriage and family therapist, certified Together in Texas counselor, a Texas transplant from California, and outdoor adventurer. Hi, welcome to Supervision with a Vision. Today, Heather and I are talking about approaching tough topics in supervision like sex. This week we read Sex Positive Counseling, published in Counseling Today, 2022. Heather, in summary, the article that we read, one of the first points they made was how important it is to educate yourself.
Yeah, there's an amazing lack of education about sex pick any age. It doesn't matter, but there's a lack of education.
It makes that, hearing you say that makes me think about recently, I don't know what platform it was on, but it was a repost of something. So a post of a post of a post. But the gist of it was women were posting really dumb things boyfriends had said about sex or reproduction, making a point about pro-life or pro-choice decisions. But I was amazed at some of the ridiculous things that people really, truly believed. Like, you can't get pregnant if you're sick.
Oh, well, that's special.
Well,
that's
probably
good.
not. I mean, double check that one before you try it out. So, just a huge lack of information out there.
I had a guy friend of mine that was very smart, very intelligent guy. He had come home from the military. We were hanging out and talking about some things that had happened in our town, while he was gone. And we started talking about something, and somehow girls and cycles and something came up. And he goes, well, you can get through a day of cramps. And I looked at him and I went, what? And he goes, a day, right? You feel bad for a day. And I was like, 7. Very loudly. I was like, you don't feel good for a long time. You don't feel good before, then you start your period and then you bleed. And he was like, you bleed for that long? I said, well, people do. And he just couldn't. I was like, this is a smart, educated guy that had a very great career in front of him. He had he just didn't have sisters, and it wasn't anything his mom ever talked to him about. So there you go.
That's a good point. So exposure.
Right.
But we're talking about that with us, with ourselves.
Right.
We need to have exposure around these tough topics, or we might be missing some information.
Right. I can think of, actually, as you're talking, I just thought of this about maybe it was 6 years ago, more than 5 years ago, because I was at a different office location in a session with a young teen. I think she was 13 or 14. We were talking about something and she said she was pansexual. And I went, huh? What is that? I had no experience with that. I had no idea what that was. I'm reminding myself, look that up as soon as she leaves the room. What is she talking about? And so I was like, oh, tell me more about that. And she just kept talking and telling me different things in her explanation of it. And she wasn't that far off. But I was like, okay, but also you're 13. Sounds like you at 13 maybe haven't had any experiences that would lead you down one path or the other. So it was very interesting to
I relate to that there was a point long enough ago that clients were coming in and wanting to discuss things like that. And I felt like, I don't know enough about this.
Right. How am I supposed to have these conversations if I am not educated or aware?
Can you think of any other topics, not specifically sex or sex related, that are just tough topics that you think, I need to know, I have to have some information in order to
I
work with this?
It kind of goes along with sex, but pornography is a huge one.
Yeah.
People coming in and talking about it. People coming in and having different personalities. It was very popular there for a while to be a furry.
Yes.
That was different. Hadn't heard of that. That came across my lap and I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to research that.
So trends, preferences related to sexuality or sex. Related but not related. I feel like this was social media. And I think a lot of parents come to me with those questions and they go, I don't know what all these apps are. I know what this one is, and I think I know what it does, but maybe I don't. So I think that sometimes not is a tough topic, but something I feel like I need to be educated about in order to effectively work with someone who's got a lot of social media interaction.
Right.
Like you and I were talking about a parent that maybe needs to know what's possible on these apps and that there are different ways of having parental control.
Right.
Or what the safety features are of each app and that they are constantly changing.
Right. They're forever changing. I think it's also important to know the like terminology. Like kids talk, especially in texting, with like acronyms or like different like things. Like if you don't know what that means, like you won't catch it. If you could be checking your kid's phone all day long, but you won't know.
This happened to my mom and I don't know, a long time ago. I think she still remembers it because she tries not to do it. But she was texting me and her response was a capital letter Y. And my response was, well, because, I was trying to answer and she would respond again with a capital letter Y, back and forth. And I was reading that she was asking me the question, why?
Right.
And finally I said, I don't know how to explain it a different way. This is just the answer. I was talking to a 4 or 5-year-old who keeps saying why. And she said, yeah, right. I understand. That's why I said capital letter Y. Yes.
You're like, but you made that your own thing. That's not a thing.
I was like, the letter Y means why? Question mark. Right. And she went, oh. Yeah. Awesome. And then she said, why?
Well, there you go.
But yeah, I mean, that's like knowing a different language.
Another thing is like drug culture and drug like stuff. Like it's important to know what, especially just locally, like what's popular in your town, your area, because your clients are going to bring it up.
Okay, the next point in our article, basically, I mean, this is a summary of the article. Know yourself. Know how you feel about things. Know when you feel vulnerable about different topics. How do you see this applying to supervision?
I like to prepare my supervisees that, like, especially if you're doing marriage therapy, you are going to hear it all. People are going to tell you more details than you ever wanted to know because they think you need all the details about whatever. But sex, whatever, like be prepared. Like it's going to come out because once they're talking about a situation or feeling vulnerable or not feeling vulnerable with their spouse or significant other.
So does that mean know yourself and you have to be prepared that anything could happen? So does that mean if you know, that means know how you feel about all of those topics?
I think know how you feel about them, but then also know that that's completely separate from the counseling room.
Maybe we can think of some examples. If we're talking about sex with clients and we're saying you need to know yourself, does that mean you need to know not related to them or connected to them or what you're doing, but you need to know where your values lie or where you stand,
right?
Or how you feel about something.
Right. And that might not be the same.
Right. I mean, we hadn't really planned on talking about that. I think that's a Pandora's box a little bit. In the United States, there are a couple of states that have laws that say that counselors are protected from working with clients that have different beliefs or values than they do. And whether you think that is ethical or appropriate or not is one thing,
like a
but
whole different podcast.
Right. That's a whole nother Pandora's box there. But I think that also is an example of know yourself. And the way I translate that when I'm talking to supervisees, because usually when I introduce that idea that there are states that allow, they legally protect counselors from having to provide services to people that they don't align with. Usually my supervisees go, oh, terrible, horrible. They just instantly think, oh, this is the worst thing ever. And I say back to them, well, imagine if you did get a client who has beliefs that are very strongly in opposition to yours, and it happens to be pivotal to their counseling.
Right. It's the crux of all. Yeah.
I mean, since we're talking about sex, maybe we're talking about a client that comes to you and wants to talk about their process through abortion.
Right.
And you're very staunchly pro-life. Or someone who wants to come and talk to you about transitioning. And you have a strong opinion about transitioning.
Right.
That maybe it's not ethical for you to see those clients because you know about yourself that you would have a hard time separating your strong opinion from what they're working through in counseling.
Right.
I think it would be appropriate. I don't know if I think that there needs to be laws of protecting or about that, but that it would make sense. That's how I think about know yourself means, can you be objective in this situation? If you haven't even thought through the question and you don't know where you stand, I think it would be hard for you to determine if you could be objective or not.
I think that would be a pitfall real quick.
What about the other part of this article was know where you feel vulnerable. I think this comes up all the time in working with clients with eating disorders. If you're a counselor and you have had a history of eating disorders and you get a client that has an eating disorder and maybe you really relate to
like it's very similar, right?
Or you just know in that moment or right now you're feeling really vulnerable, then it might be really challenging to help them work through what they're working on.
Right. I think it can happen in lots of topics. I can see that happening if you yourself were going through a divorce and someone came in and wanted to process theirs. I can see that happening with grief. Pick a topic.
Right.
If you don't know yourself and where you're at with things, then it's really going to cause problems, or it could cause problems.
I think perhaps sex is a good example, but all the ones that you just gave, the more vulnerable, the more controversial, the more personal the topic, the more challenging it is to be objective. And so that makes this point even more important. Know yourself, know where you feel vulnerable. I think it applies to not just us as counselors, and us as supervisors, but maybe even teachers and students. That if a teacher is giving advice and they haven't really spent time to think about how they feel about it, where they feel vulnerable, they might give advice that's really one-sided.
I think that can happen easily. I think actually anytime that you're interacting with a group of people, and if you're not cueing into what a specific person in that group needs, then it can go aside very quickly if you don't know your own personal stance. You haven't thought about it.
I think recently, this is like a game of telephone almost. I had a supervisee not that long ago, not focused on play therapy or eating disorders. She wanted to see adults. And what she was talking about about her client, conceptualizing her client, she was using a lot of diet culture language. And I was wanting her to identify some goals, and the goals that my supervisee was identifying were things like she needs to lose weight. She eats junk all the time. She's not taking care of herself.
You're like, oh.
And I had to really quickly, I had to go, take yourself out of this and be objective and help her to be more objective. So I had to really quickly think through, how do I point this out to her without showing that I have all these little bells and whistles going off in my head, that the things that she's saying have an impact. Even if she's not saying it exactly that way to her client, and that we can't take ourselves out of that, but we need to be aware of how what we're doing and saying and thinking affects our client.
Absolutely.
Okay. Last point, and what we were talking about, have really good boundaries. So if you're talking about tough topics in supervision or in counseling, educate yourself, know how you feel, know where you feel vulnerable, and then apply all of that good stuff and have really, really good boundaries.
Clear-cut boundaries. And it is like, you are human. So it's 100% okay for you to say in a session, whether it's supervision or with a client, I'm going to need to know more about that. Or I'm going to need more education on that. Like, know what, you need to say.
I think that's a boundary. By acknowledging I'm limited right now, I don't feel like I know enough. Or acknowledging, I do that. I'll say sometimes, depending on the topic, and also thinking sometimes I'm pretty transparent, so a client or a supervisee notices anyway. But maybe we're beginning to discuss a topic that's kind of personal or that I have a strong opinion about. And I might say, I know that how I feel about this topic is really specific to my opinion. So owning it, totally acknowledging. If we are talking about that you're telling your 13-year-old she's fat and she needs to lose weight, I'm going to have a strong opinion. So I'm just going to say that first and then try to manage my strong opinion so that it doesn't completely affect what we're talking about.
That's right.
How do you do that with supervisees?
it's come up in different, like we're talking about all the different topics this affects. I mean, one of them that my husband and I joke about this, but several years back, I was working election night for a presidential election, and I don't know why I worked that night. So I'm not sure any therapy happened. I saw 3 clients, but all 3 clients were on their phones, like distracted, not paying attention, talking about how if this person was elected and impacted them this way, and if this person was elected, impacted, like I literally came home and I was so like stirred up, like about, like I wasn't even really focused on my like personal thoughts about it. It was like, whoa, the world's crazy kind of feeling.
Yeah.
That I was like, I'm not doing that ever again. Like, I'm not working on an election night because people are distracted. And I had to kind of evaluate and go, okay, well, was it the clients I was seeing, or was it, was it good distraction, bad distraction for them? And I was like, these are hot topics. And like with one client in particular, they reached back out to me after they hadn't seen me in quite a few years and wanted to make sure I was in the same political party they were.
Huh. Interesting.
And I was like, oh, I think that's an interesting question. And I don't think you get to know my political party.
Yeah.
So if you're good with that, I'll see you. And if you're not good with that, it's a whole different thing. Because my political party should not affect your counseling.
Yeah. I think I have felt that way, and we didn't even talk about this. I've felt this way since we've seen each other last. The school shooting in Texas that happened. And immediately I was seeing kids in my office later that day and the next day. And part of me thought, I'm kind of distracted. Maybe I should just cancel these sessions. I don't feel like I'm really focused. And the kid, like you're saying, the kids were coming in and they were distracted, or we weren't talking about the things we usually talk about because they just, some of them weren't even talking about it, but I could tell that they were rattled. And so I did consider maybe cancel these appointments. And I don't know yet. I may be deciding still. What I chose to do was keep the appointments, thinking that this was still a safe place for whatever it was that they needed to process it,
they could.
But I think it is a boundary that can change. And it's an important boundary to think about, but I don't know. I think maybe my decision would have been different if it felt like a tragedy that only affected me.
Right. That would feel different.
Then I would think that's about me and not them, and I'll cancel the appointment because I can't totally separate that from what's happening. Had it maybe the other way around. It's something that I don't feel affected by, but I know it's something they definitely feel connected by. Then it feels like more obvious. Well, let's have the session because it's focused on you.
And I think like distance, like if it had happened maybe really close to our areas that might have felt different.
Oh gosh, yeah. Like if we'd even been like within driving distance. We're in Texas, but we're quite a distance away. Texas is a big state. But yeah, if we'd been within driving distance and I felt like there were people that were very, very directly affected, that would have, I think, also changed my decision. So this is a moving target. This, know your boundaries means that it's somewhat affected by the information you have, somewhat affected by knowing yourself and when you feel vulnerable. But even then, there's many other factors when you're trying to decide where the boundary is. So thanks today for listening to us talk about how to handle tough topics like sex or other personal topics in supervision and counseling. Thanks for listening to Supervision with a Vision.
You've been listening to Supervision with a Vision. Head on over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Therapy Academy to join the conversation and get show notes. We'll be back next week with more Supervision with a Vision.